All right, we'll call the meeting to order. Kerrville Economic Improvement Corporation. I will lead the invocation this morning. If you'll bow your heads this afternoon. Lord, as always, we thank you for all that you provide us. We thank you for our community and all those who serve on its behalf. We just pray for wisdom today and always. We pray for compassion to those that serve us. And we also offer a prayer for Maggie, our former board member who's healing. We just pray for a quick and safe recovery for her. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I know we have one speaker signed up for items 6A and 6B. Do we have anybody generally that wants to speak? No? Okay. Our last meeting, we had two changes to the minutes of that meeting. One was to correct the vice president's name, and the other was to correct that on item 6C, which is the project funding agreement for the extension of the river trail, was tabled, and that's been corrected, that the motion was passed 4-1 with Greg Appel against. Is that correct? Okay. So can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Okay. In favor, raise your hand. Okay, that passes. Okay, I'm going to change the schedule around a little bit. Our finance department has the pleasure of having auditors in-house. None of whom are in this room, I take it.
None of whom are in this room right now. No, sir.
All right. So if you want to go ahead and really give us your report, we'll do it next.
Sure. Brought y'all put this in the presentation, but this is something kind of a added bonus. Okay, so I have two things actually for you guys today. I'll do your financial report, and then we'll talk just a little bit about investments and answering questions that you guys might have there. So looking first at fiscal year 22, just so you can kind of see how you ended the year. Keep in mind these are estimates until they're audited, but we're pretty solid on these kind of things. Sales tax ended the year 15% better than budget. As you know, going into 22 was just kind of anybody's guess with COVID still kind of hanging over, so we did a pretty conservative estimate for sales tax for 2022. So good performance there. Interest, same thing. So when we did the budget, even at the end of this year, we were at like 44 basis points. So interest did come back better, but we had some things at year end that kind of pulled that back in line. Expenditures all lined up with budget. Those are just monthly transfers as we talk about every month. And then the only project that we had any activity on in this past year was Arcadia Live, that debt reduction contract there. Okay, switching to fiscal year 23. Looking at your current period or month ended October 31st, 2022. Your sales tax came in at $442,000, which was a 21% over October of 2021. We have received November's already, so you're going to see it be down from November of 2021. However, there was in 2021 there was $135,000 overall prepayment, so payment made for future periods. So adjusting that out, we're about 6%, 6.2% better. So there's some adjustment we have to make there just for that consideration. Interest revenue is still coming back better. Again, we budgeted 1% over, but we all know what's happened in the last few months. So the Fed actually has made 6 rate increases now. We're estimating we're probably going to make another one until things flatten out a little bit. You see your maturity there of your commercial paper that came in, and then all your expenses are just lining up exactly with budget. And then the only project activity you had was a little bit for the airport. Also, I know y'all talked a little bit about last month, but we looked at the Peterson contract, and it is to be paid in 2 tranches. So the first one at substantial completion and the second one at completion of the project. So we anticipate that we'll have some of that coming forward. I didn't flip the slide, did I? Okay, so your cash flow here, the first column is through October of 2023. Again, showing your beginning cash balance, your sales tax that came in, and then the maturity with your ending cash balance of 4.8. Investments on your cash flow are plugged in as they're going to mature, and then on the expense side, I guess you would refer to it that way because it's going to be cash going out, at least going to the balance sheet from the income statement. We have those plugged in as kind of where we are hoping to be able to make those with the maturities that you already have if rates stay where we anticipate that they're going to stay. I put this in. This is citywide. This was just more for information than anything else. This is just sales tax trends, and so I find it interesting that regardless of what's happening, the trend line is still the same. So we use this a lot when we're doing projections to kind of decide what's the average running, what's the increase or the decrease, and then applying that to the trend lines as we look forward. And you can see clearly the drop-offs there are during the COVID periods of time, but outside of that, it remains very constant. And so this gives you multiple years of history just to look at kind of something we use as a tool. Okay, your last slide here is your financial analysis. So your cash analysis as of October 31st, 4.87 in your text pool. We had a commercial paper at a market value of $9.81. Text pool at the end of October was earning 3.2%. Today it's 3.9. That CP that you have on the books is at 4.2, and we do have an order that will be closing this week actually for the 500,000 that we talked about, and that one's going to come in at a flat 5%. So still seeing commercial paper ticking up. We've seen some coming across at 5.25. You just never know kind of from day to day, and getting them at those 500,000 marks can be a little bit difficult, but we're working on
What's the
potentially
maturity
one
on?
more.
On the top
We
side?
have one that matures in March.
Well, the
On the
one that you're
books
about to buy.
now. We just had one mature in October. We have another one in March. And then the one that we just bought, I think it's a 9-month. I'll have to go back and look and let you know that. But it's under 270 because we can only have it for 270 days. We talked about the sales tax. So that explanation there on those future payments. So you'll see that drop off in November. But you'll see that be higher. They paid early so last year. So that's going to throw the increase off. And then a list of your completed committed projects down there. And again, on cash flow, we kind of just allocate that out depending on best guess a little bit based on timelines that comes into us. But that's kind of, you never know. So the annual budget really is what we look at there. But we kind of try to spread those out just from a cash flow standpoint. Okay, any questions on that before we talk about investments?
No.
No. Okie dokie. So this is really brief, but I know we've talked about investing a little bit, so I just wanted to give you a couple things and then some thoughts and some discussion on that. So again, we do use Public Funds Investment Act as our guide by law that we have to use for investing any public funds. With that, our priorities are safety, liquidity, diversification, and yield in that order. So I know right now we really want to take advantage of rates that are out there, but we do have to think about cash flow and some other factors as we talk about investing in the market. So just want to give you a quick look at citywide portfolios. So this is kind of what we deal with every day. So as of 10/31, this is citywide without EIC. This does include the bond funds that we received in September. So you can see our diversification there, how we have things invested. I didn't include rates on here at the end of, but they're lining up exactly like we just talked about with text pool. Texas class is actually a little bit higher on their rate. I'm not sure why that happens, but those pools fluctuate. If the market's better, certain pools will be better. If the market's worse, a different pool will be better. So we just kind of play it by ear to see where we can receive a better rate. So looking at EIC investments, back to March, Trina brought the idea of putting some money into something different besides the pool because rates were going up at that time. So in April, she bought a $1 million CP. That's the one, I believe, that just matured in October. And then in September, we bought another one with the anticipation of that October one maturing. We do have that FHLB note for $500,000. That'll be settling on the 17th. And then we're looking around for a $500,000 investment We've tried to get a couple of them, but at that amount, sometimes it's hard to put those packages together where they can buy them. So just gave you a monthly snapshot of kind of what your cash and investments looks like for total investments, tax pool, and everything. And then at the very bottom, you'll see that estimated as November 17th, because that's when the cash will actually leave for that investment that we just bought. So as we've talked through this, and I know I've talked about it with Michael and Trina and you guys, and listened to discussions that y'all have had over the past few months, my recommendation is really just to leave our investment policy as it is, just to allow us to use the City of Kerrville's investment policy and the internal guidelines that we use, and some common sense applications to be able to apply it to what y'all need based on your cash flow, based on committed projects and those kind of things. Take advantage of rates, obviously, when we can. With that, it can't be our primary focus, but we're in a market right now where we can invest on short terms and get you kind of a quick return on some money without tying up money long term to be able to interfere with your project. So, again, using a conservative approach, of course, safety and liquidities are our first priorities, and then, of course, bringing you a monthly report with our regular monthly financials on where we are with investments. So definitely open to any kind of discussions you guys have or questions that y'all want to talk about regarding investments or financials.
So Julie, I think at least for me, I don't want to see money tied up in commercial paper and that preventing us from being able to do projects. That said, if we can make a substantial increase in our rate of return by buying commercial paper, I think that makes sense. But we obviously don't want to be in the business of, letting the tail wag the dog and be up here every month analyzing investment opportunities. So I think we'd really look to you guys, at least from my standpoint, to say, hey, now's a good time, considering cash flow analysis, what you have committed, what's coming down the pipe. We can decide from time to time that, okay, hey, it makes sense to put some more money in commercial paper because we can get a better rate of return and we don't see projects coming or what have you. But I think just doing it on a case-by-case basis, each month or once a quarter, whenever y'all decide to bring it to us, makes sense.
Yeah, and we'll kind of apply the same standard we use for the city. We look at cash flow. What money do we have going out? What do we have committed out there? What kind of liquidity we need, those kind of things. And just keeping in mind that y'all have projects that come up spur of the moment, that if you need the money, you need it right now. So keeping those kind of things in mind as well, and just keeping it short term, because we do have that Federal Home Loan Bank. We did get that one for, I think, 6 months, which is good. And right now with the yield curve, being inverted, we're getting short-term stuff for the same rate as we're getting long-term stuff. So it's really good for you guys because we're not having to go out longer term to get that better rate of return. So I think we just watch it, manage it, as we should with cash flow. Like I said, we do the same kind of application for the total city portfolio all the time. Just using some common sense and getting it where we can, but not getting you in a position where you can't spend money if you need to.
Okay. Anybody else have any thoughts or questions?
I have a question. So is there kind of a historical spread between tax pool type returns and a commercial paper? I know it's a little bit apples to oranges because tax pool is not tied up and a commercial paper maybe on a nine month is locked in, so to speak. And right now that difference is 1%, but that probably anticipates the next Fed increase.
It does.
Is it a 0.5% premium for risk premium for commercial paper as opposed to?
It just depends. And so, when the rate changes, of course, Texpool invests in commercial paper. So they have a lot of commercial paper built into their portfolio. So, they're kind of, you're right, they're already anticipating the next increase, which we suspect is probably going to be 50 basis points, yet to be seen. But it just depends. So when the market was down really low, tech school's going to be lower, but then some of your other, pools are going to be a little higher if they have less commercial paper. So we kind of see kind of an inverse relationship. When securities are higher, then typically commercial paper is lower, and vice versa. It really just depends on the market and where the curve is. And right now T-bills are as high as anything, and those, we can sell those. So we've looked at that as an option also, because we can liquidate those without the penalty that we would have with commercial paper or some of those.
My sense is that after the next increase, the expectation that the Fed's going to pause and therefore should be able to get a closer return on what we can get on commercial paper without having to commit to a 9-month maturity.
Right, and we're trying to keep it in that 6 month if we can, just kind of looking to the future. So if we get a good rate at 6 months, and like I said, we're seeing some come across right now at 5.25 that are 6 months. If you back up a couple of years ago, we'd had to go out 3 years to get twice the rate that we were getting for a 6 months.
But I do think a ladder makes sense
Mhm.
for us because of the nature of our funding requests. And
Right.
so
And that's what we do with the city too. We ladder it off, and for our portfolio, of course, debt's a lot bigger, so we align investments maturities with debt payments, and that way we know we're not touching regular cash flow. We're touching investment money only. So there's that kind of model too. Y'all's isn't as big, so a little bit different, but definitely not stacking it to where everything matures. And so we kind of have that in cash flow where one matures and we'll renew that one, but then knowing that as we can stagger it, we can't say once a quarter because we don't know. Like we tried to buy something last week, we just couldn't get because we go out there and we offer 500,000, and you have to make a 3 million to be able to buy in. Or
do I remember correctly that we can only invest up to 30% of our available cash?
Well, it's a policy that we use in-house. It's not really like a hard policy. We use that as a guideline. So any financial advisor is going to tell you, try to keep commercial paper at 30% or less, but that doesn't mean your total portfolio. So there's really not a rule as far as our total portfolio goes, but we really do need to align it with cash flow because that's really what makes the most sense when, you've got $5 million. Seems like a lot of money until you go do a $2 million project, and we can only spend what's cash on hand, which right now
It does seem to make sense with as much cash as we have on. If we can get 50 or 75 basis point spread on commercial paper, having a third or so of our liquid assets in a laddered
right.
commercial paper would probably be a smart thing to
Right,
do.
that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, I think that we've got plenty of cash on hand, plenty of cash flow coming in, that we could easily have $3 million out there, and not because we don't get a project here again.
Right.
Nobody walks in that door today and we're going to write them a check for $1 million tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
It's at least 3 to 4 months, at least,
right
before that happens. So it's not like there's something that can pending walk in and we're going to have to
write a check tomorrow.
write a bunch of checks for. So I personally think we could get up to 3. Actually, I think more than that, but 3 million. Really easily right now, especially now. If you can get Federal Home Loan Bank money at 5.5%, man, that's what I'd be buying.
The problem is the amount that we can invest,
I
and
completely
so
understand.
yeah, we grab it when we can. Like when he sends something out to us, we try.
I understand it. It's not. It's easier said than done.
Yeah,
But-
sometimes. No, that's definitely. I'm in agreement with that, and just keeping you liquid, but taking advantage while we can, because we're not going to see these rates forever. I mean, 4 months ago we were barely making 20 basis points, 5 months ago. So.
Also think at some point in time, Fed starts decreasing rates, we could catch a little longer period of time at higher rates, because tax pool rates are going to adjust down faster than
Correct.
commercial paper rates. So I think having more in anticipation, sometime the Fed's starting to back off of these rate increases
Right.
is going to make sense.
And we watch it, we're pretty much every day, and so does our financial advisor. Our city policy says we have a max of 3 years. Probably wouldn't put EIC money out there for 3 years, but, wouldn't hesitate to go 18 months if it was a good rate, for a smaller piece.
Do we want to give any direction about how much to invest, or just let her do what she wants, what she feels comfortable doing?
Well, my thought is, do we just take it as we go? So right now, with what is to be invested, we'll have about $2 million.
1.5, I think. No, yeah, 2 million, because we just bought one that's gonna put us at 1.5, and I'm looking for another one, so 2 million.
So we'll have 2 out of roughly 6.
Yeah, what's your cash and investments?
5.8.
5.8.
That's about it.
So, yeah, but we'll certainly look at it, and like I said, we've analyzed that cash flow pretty close, and the question is always project timelines. And we've been working with, our engineering and those guys to try to get us a timeline when we have a project that comes up. But again, sometimes when you have outside projects like Peterson, we just don't know. So we need to make sure when they turn an invoice, we're able to pay them. Although, that'll be 800,000, and then the other committed projects you have.
So is there any appetite among the board to pursue an investment of more than $2 million at this point?
I think it should be 3.
I've got to defer to the city. I mean, that's their expertise, is what they do. They've done it for a long, long period of time, and I'm gonna defer and let the city make those decisions. I mean, we've got a full staff out there working hard to do that, but that's just my feeling.
Is there any history
So,
that EIC's done in the past?
right, so historically, like before March, when Trina came and said, hey, do you mind if we go and put some money in something else that's better? They've never invested any money historically in anything but text pool. So it's a little bit new to EIC. And I think that's kind of what's sparking some of these conversations is typically your cash is your cash and it's in text pool, and that's where we've always left it. But as the market's gotten better, you know, we kind of been having some behind the scenes conversations and saying we could probably do better, but it's never been done. So let's approach the board and make sure you guys were comfortable tying up money for longer where it's not, you know, write a check and it's free. And it seems like that was kind of the appetite. So that's when we kind of started kicking that off. But it's never been done with, you know, with that amount of money. So, I mean, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a good thing. We need to capitalize on it while we can, just keeping in mind all the other things you have going on.
I don't have a problem with a 30% figure as far as, I think that's probably a good rule of thumb. I think what that doesn't take into consideration is how liquid we are right now. And, you know, we've been struggling to spend the money we have coming in every year.
Right.
So,
When I
I
think
don't. I don't think it's irresponsible. We'd still have, you know, $2.5 million, $3 million.
And if we ladder it-
cash, and then you've also got a ladder, and you've
Mhm.
also got revenue coming in every month.
right.
So
If we ladder it, I mean, I don't see a problem with it, honestly. So we'll just do what we do, if that's okay with you guys. And like I said, it's new to EIC, so I think that's why we wanted to have those discussions, because we've never really tied up money that wasn't liquid historically that I could find back as far as I can look. It's never been invested like that before. So we can just keep bringing you monthly reports for now, and you know, having conversations as they need to. We'll, you know, watch the rates, and if we think we can get something that's going to benefit you, then we'll do that.
Any other comments on this? Okay.
Okay, I appreciate you guys letting me move up. I'm
Yeah.
sure my auditors appreciate that.
Thanks for what you do.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
All right, next item on the agenda is KEDC update. Gil?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, now that Katie's here, I don't have to give a very long report. All right, so it's been a real busy past couple of months, and it will be going into December as well. So I'm going to start with the Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing. They hosted their facility renovation ceremony and an economic development update. That was last month. It was kind of like their groundbreaking ceremony where they had a presentation on the scope of the project, timeline, job numbers, some of the wages. Then they did a virtual tour of the construction of the permanent facility that they're going to be moving into. So I think they're anticipating September of next year to finally move into it. So again, they did a virtual tour of that. And actually, we were at Buzzy's Barbecue when they were doing the ceremony. And they did report that they have created year-to-date 70 jobs. So it was, and before that, we're able to tour the actual temporary facility. So walking into their facility and just kind of looking at their organizational chart and seeing that 90% of those 70 employees are from Kerrville. It's just kind of reminds you that that's why we do what we do. And then they had some at the actual ceremony. They had some video testimonials of some Kerrville employees, some young employees. So again, it just kind of gets you excited about that. It was very well attended, and it also provided our leadership an opportunity to meet Killdeer's management from North Dakota. We listened to the status of the project, some of the forecasts in the industry, and then how they're working with some of the local suppliers and their workforce as well. And they also had a pretty neat idea where, since it was kind of like a groundbreaking, they had a ceremonial signing of a steel beam that would be installed at the permanent facility. So that was pretty nice. As far as editorial placement, we've gotten some very good national press in the last month. Both American Statesman, Express News, but Business Facilities, Area Development Magazine, Industry Today, and Aviation Pros. So again, these are national trade publications. It's great because it helps us with our narrative as far as telling the story of Kerrville, the KEDC, and that we're open for business. And especially for our target audience, which are C-level executives of Fortune 500 companies, site selectors, and location advisors as well. Then the following week, we hosted in partnership with the Office of the Governor, the Small Business Series. I know some of y'all were there, actually for both events. So Governor's staff was very pleased. We had about 230 people that participated. They trickled in and out throughout the day. Of those, about 100 were either small businesses or entrepreneurs, not just from the area, but they came in from some of the adjacent counties as well. Texas Workforce Commissioner Julian Alvarez, he visited our community again. He opened the event, did an outstanding job as far as promoting Kerrville and basically come in and do business here. And he's got a huge social media platform, so I saw how he sent that out. The luncheon that day was hosted by Texas Iberico. I think I'm pronouncing it right. It's a small business out of Menard, Texas. Great story about how they work with the Office of the Governor, their economic development team, put them in touch with HEB, and now they're one of their suppliers. Their HEB's economic development contact was here to facilitate that discussion during the lunch, so we had some FaceTime with them, and they said, look, we're always looking for some small niche businesses to put their products in our stores. So we started kind of working with them to see who's here in our area, again, so they can be a supplier to HEB. Shortly thereafter was the forum, and Katie will cover that one here in a bit. Coming back to Julian Alvarez, we did have some time to meet with him the evening before, discuss some opportunities, give him an update on what we have going on in Kerrville, and then also discuss some of the daycare challenges that we have as it pertains to workforce. And he said, we started talking about specifically incentivizing either existing daycare operations or some of our top industrial leaders, encouraging them to create their own daycare center. They said, look, there's funding out there for that right now. So as a result of that, we'll be meeting with him and his team next month in Austin to start really putting a plan of action together and trying to see how we can start importing some of that money to create some of those programs here. Again, under the umbrella of increasing our workforce numbers. Top 40 awards, that was last week, very well attended. So we actually had Mary Lou Retton. We actually booked her for 2 events, so she came back. She very, very interesting. She took time to actually mingle with a lot of people that were there. She struck up a great relationship with the mayor. She said she absolutely loved our downtown and the Arcadia Theater. She really liked that. And a great event to recognize some of our local talent and our leadership as well. Okay, wrapping up here with some of the projects. Tomorrow, actually, we're meeting with Mary Rohr at the airport and discussing some of the projects for 2023, what we have in mind, what they're working on. And specifically what we're looking at is, okay, how there's industry there already. What do we need to do to start helping them grow? Because that's where some of those companies are at right now. And possibly some marketing initiatives as well. Assistant manager Michael Hornies and myself, we met with a firm out of Dallas a couple of weeks ago. It's a developer looking at property, specifically in the Opportunity Zone areas, asking about some specific sites, some uses, and what have you. And again, this is kind of a question that we've been getting from some national developers, asking about the appetite for the local community to support such projects. Talking about media, there was a great national article in one of the real estate trade publications on the Tybee Commons. So that one's starting to gain some national press. And what's good about that is just, we'll start getting the calls from other developers as well. And then lastly, we had a retail developer, actually also from the Dallas area, looking at properties and specifically for a name brand steak restaurant. So we're getting ready to punt that one over to the city so they can take the lead on that one. So that concludes the part of my report. Katie will come up and we'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Gil.
Yeah, unless you have questions for me now.
We'll wait
Okay.
and hear from Katie.
Good afternoon, members of the board, Mr. Chairman. I thank you guys in advance for giving me a little grace on my first presentation. It can be a little bit intimidating. But yes, this last month and a half, I joined on October 3rd, and it has been a very full month, to say the least. A lot of the stuff that I've been focusing on has been education and getting connected with leaders that are important to this role. I kicked off my start with a Texas Economic Development Conference in San Antonio. I was able to meet some of my colleagues and also competition inside the state of Texas. And I walked away with about 27 valuable connections that I'm looking forward to following up with and learning from. It was during that conference that I also had an opportunity to, they had some really great speakers and some fantastic education. And so while I was still brand new, I was able to make a few notes about things that sounded exciting that could be advantageous for our community here in Kerrville. Like Gil mentioned, we did have the Kildare Mountain Manufacturing Celebration. That was a great opportunity for me to meet with a gentleman by the name of Joe Magruder. He represents aerospace and aviation from the Texas Office of the Governor. He also brought along his colleague, Ricardo Canova, who represents this region. We will be meeting with him on site the beginning of December. He was also at the Texas Economic Development Corporation event, and it was really good to visit with them and hear some of their ideas and insights about different challenges that we're facing. It was also a great opportunity for me to meet the Kildare Mountain Manufacturing owners and their company leadership, because prior to that I wasn't real familiar with them. So then Gil mentioned we hosted the Business and Innovation Forum that was co-hosted with the Office of the Governor, and we had the forum in the afternoon. We did experience an unanticipated challenge when one of our keynote speakers canceled at the last minute. So that gave us an opportunity to think on our feet creatively. And what we ended up doing is we subbed in a local leaders panel that we titled Practical Application of Money Management for Small Business Owners. And it was well received and well attended. And so far we've received good feedback on that. So I think that it may have been better than what we originally planned. I also had an opportunity to meet with Julian Alvarez, and like Gil mentioned, we will be working with him to find out more about what the TWC has to support communities like ours with childcare challenges like the ones that we're facing. This afternoon I actually completed a first draft of a proposal that Gil has yet to review, but we've already started moving forward on that project, and we're excited to see where it takes us. Another project that I'm working on is creating something that I'm calling an internal Wikipedia. It's kind of like a Wikipedia for the KEDC organization. And so it will include anything that somebody would need to know about our organization. So if Gil is hit by a bus, if I'm hit by a bus, somebody can come in and they have all the resources at their fingertips. So we'll have standard operating procedures, our automations, resources, tutorials. That way in the future when we do onboard new people, it's all going to be there in one place. So that's something that I've created an outline for, and we'll be making progress on that project as well. Last week I attended my basic economic development education in Tampa, and that was intense, but also really great education. And I think that probably brings me to the end of what I have to report on for this month. Are there any questions?
Hey, what's going to be your focus at KEDC going forward?
I'm going to be focused on business expansion and retention. So I'll be working mostly with the community leaders and business owners that are here in Kerrville. And then I'll serve in a support role to Gil for other projects that he has going on.
Okay.
But correct me if I'm wrong. Anything else?
Questions?
I have a general question, probably for Gil. When you're talking to prospects, I'm always curious because I'm sure the dynamic shifts, but when you're talking to site selectors and prospects right now, what kind of facilities, other than do we have an appetite for it? What kind of facilities or space are they looking for?
Okay. So yeah, the appetite usually comes from they've already done all their due diligence and they're like, okay, we see an opportunity there. What they want to know is, as far as the appetite is there opposition? Is there opposition to growth? That's the main thing, because they can pick up on it with media, but usually they'll call the local EDC because our job is, we don't sugarcoat stuff. I mean, we're not going to give them the tour and show them the nice areas, because I'll have, for instance, companies that come in, executives of major companies, and they'll be like that hasn't happened in this community, but in other communities, take me to the bad part of town. I'm like, what? So, they want to see like, okay, because, sometimes that's where our workforce comes from. And sometimes I can tell what the community is made of. They'll stop at Walmart and they want to see the people. They want to see what people drive, so on and so forth. It's just little things that I've picked up over the years that they're looking for. So when they ask about the appetite, that's usually, okay, we want to hear from you. And of course, we'll tell them, okay, there's XYZ, there is some opposition, but for the most part, I mean, the community is growing and here's what we have to offer. Outside of that, it's usually buildings or raw land. And then the one real important number that they're looking for is if it's an industry, it's unemployment rate. So ideally, and this sounds kind of weird, you want to be between a 4 to 6 unemployment rate because you have capacity to absorb, some of these companies that come in. Anything below that, you have to make a very, very good case for it, which we do, right? And then the other one is if it's on the retail side, they're looking for critical mass, which is rooftops. It's like how many rooftops you have in your community, and that dictates what kinds of retailers will be coming into the area. So those are the two main criteria, and then everything else falls into place.
Anything else? Great, thank you
All right.
guys.
Thank you.
Welcome, Katie.
Thank you.
All right, Michael, you want to give us a project status update?
I do not have too much at this point. From the Tranquility Island standpoint, staff had discussion about contacting Representative Muir's office, see if we can kind of kickstart some of that GLO easement acquisition portions. But Finance did just cut a check to the GLO for that. So we are moving our way along that process. So hopefully we'll get that easement back to us soon. Absent that easement does not inhibit or prohibit any of the events that are planned for this Christmas or anything like that. It's part of that process. We just had a renewal from another easement upriver over by the Nature Center from the GLO, and that just came through the door. So we should have some good news on that front pretty quickly.
On that,
Sir.
in the lighting ceremony, we got invitations, and he said that George said only about half of the trees had been decorated. Is that because of the easement issue, or are they just that far behind, or have they run out of money and they can't do all the trees?
Don't know if I can speak for George, but help me out, Ashley.
Can't speak to that. I don't know what he's referring
I'll have to get some more information back to you. Wouldn't be because of the easements.
I'm sorry?
Wouldn't be because of the easements,
Okay.
my understanding of that, but I'll get you better information on that.
Yeah, I'd like to know that as well.
Yes, sir. Kerrville Airport improvements, they're mobilizing still at this point, so we authorized the extension to the agreement. We are going to be going out there tomorrow to go take another look, but excited about the project. Just waiting to get it all started and get it done. But they've got a 180-day window from start to finish where they can complete that project per their contract, the actual construction, which will then include the site work. So should have that done within the next 6 months. Killdeer Mountain Manufacturing, as we all talked about, or as Gil talked about earlier, they had the sort of groundbreaking and had everybody out. Hopefully some of y'all were able to make it out there to that. Starting to do work out there. A lot of stuff's going, so they need to be out there yesterday. So they're working as fast as they can get. Peterson Medical, last time we spoke, we had a pre-construction meeting, and so they're mobilizing out there and they're working their way through the project. And like Julie said, the first tranche of money that's going to come out of EIC will be on substantial completion for that infrastructure. That's going to be $800,000. And just so everybody has an understanding of what that looks like, substantial completion is basically Kyle's department and Public Works, they determine what that substantial completion looks like. We pretty much have them all the way done at that point. And if you need to, Kyle can speak to that specifically, but we make them go pretty far along in that process before there's any money that turns over. And with that, I'll turn it back over. Now we have a few more projects to add to this list, the fitness court being one of them.
Downtown
I'm
improvements.
losing my acronyms, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the downtown improvements. So we've got a pretty short window for the downtown improvements. And Mike Whitler said should be about 60 days to mobilize for them. So we gave them a little bit of a window just in case something went haywire. Nothing's gotten started yet with regards to that. And the fitness court, we got word from them that
Delivered Thursday.
was
Delivered Thursday.
was delivered on Thursday, so we have that material on site. We're gonna have to do concrete pour, but we've already got the materials stored at the Singing Wind Park. That's right. So that one's moving along. We should meet our deadlines for all that. And I'll add those two to the list.
Okay.
Sorry they weren't on there.
While you're up there, can we go ahead and move up item 6C and have you give us a list of kind of what the priority programs are?
Yes, sir. Martin, if we can pull up 6C.
So let me give a little bit of explanation to the other members of the board. So we, Danny and I had a conversation with Michael and asked him to bring us what was on City Council's wish list and kind of a prioritization of what those projects might be, so that we can get a broader understanding of what may be coming down the pipe in terms of an ask from EIC, so that we can have that information as we consider some of these funding requests. So that's the effort here, is to just try to get a big picture overview of what council has identified as their priorities.
Well, thank y'all for bringing that up. I mean, I think that's an important part of EIC is kind of an understanding of what everything's going on. And we live in a vacuum. Sometimes we think everybody knows and understands all these things, and forget that everybody has lives. And this isn't, until it's in front of you, it's not necessarily a known thing. So what you see in front of you there is essentially a breakdown of the budget discussions with City Council in terms of both a priority list from a policy standpoint and from a programmatic standpoint. This is not an exhaustive list. These were the things that made it to the top of the list for the City Council during those budget retreats. And so you can see on that list from a policy standpoint, there is any number of things. Most of these are germane to not necessarily EIC projects, but they do relate from a policy standpoint of what is the City Council's direction on those policies and how do they affect the programs that we have in place. And what you'll see on the right-hand side is kind of a ranked order of those programs that council thought were the most important. On that list, you'll see there are 3 items that are related to EIC application. The first of those was the River Trail, which hence the application that came before you last month for discussion. Next on that list was aquatics. So the 5th one down was that downtown River Trail, and then aquatics being the next one on that list, and then you go a little bit further down is Scott Schreiner Golf Course. And so those were the 3 quality of life projects that are kind of for consideration. In addition to that, what I didn't put down on paper just yet, but we'll talk about at the second part of this, was City Council just approved the water and wastewater master plan, which has about $120 million.
180, I think.
$180 million worth of projects. A lot of them are
Good for y'all.
yes, sir. Yes.
Thank you.
And if you can fund them all tonight, we'd appreciate it. No, that has a whole host of projects in it, a lot of which are developer driven. And those are growth-based projects. If this development would come out to this section of town, then this would be necessary, right? And so we'll have catalyst areas in town, and that developer-driven portion, I think, is what we probably want to talk to you all about and talk about a few areas. Not really a lot, because we don't know necessarily what the developer market looks like. Will it go out here? We hope. Does it pop up and go out here? we never know. Somebody might get a deal on a project, so we try to read the tea leaves as best we can. And so I think we'll have a few areas that we think are important to talk about when it comes to infrastructure. But with that, I'm going to start off with Ashley Boyle to kind of go over the quality of life projects as we see them. Okay. Ashley.
Good afternoon. Okay, so here are 4 identified quality of life projects. Michael introduced the first 3, and then we added Singing Wind Park as we just approved the master plan for that park. So I'm going to walk through each of these different potential projects. So the Kerrville River Trail obviously is one that's been on the agenda recently, and you'll hear more about that again tonight under 2 other items. So for each different topic, you'll see support for Kerrville 2050 outlined here, and then you'll also see support for the Parks Master Plan. I'm not going to read them all to you, but all the projects are supported by Kerrville 2050 and our master planning process. So as you saw this slide last time, the master plan calls for several different extensions of the Kerrville River Trail. The number 1 priority in the Parks Master Plan was the downtown segment from G Street down to the library. Of course, we have the master plan, which we will talk about later on the agenda. Several different potential extensions, all pursuant to direction, funding, and easement procurement. To move forward on extensions for the river trail, we need to keep in mind a few things. We need to keep in mind consideration of the master plan priorities, direction for desired extensions, feasibility for each of the extensions. Each of the extensions would require a study like we've done recently on the downtown extension to let us know what it's going to look like for cost, how many easements are associated, what are the construction challenges, and go forward from there. And then after that, we'll need to identify the funding for the actual project itself. Okay, moving on to any questions over the river trail before I move on to the
I just want to make sure I'm reading it right. Is in terms of priority, is the extension between G Street and the island a higher priority than the possible extension going west?
Let me bring it back to that slide. Yes, so the number 1 priority in the master plan, that was a public process, was the downtown segment. Second was the extension west.
Okay.
Again, these are priorities of the public, not of staff. Okay, Olympic pool. So again, the Kerrville 2050 support, action items, Parks Master Plan, called for a couple of things. First was identifying and addressing the short-term maintenance issues associated with the pool, which we'll talk about in a minute, and then develop the aquatics complex that came out of the aquatics feasibility study. So if you recall, we launched back a couple of years ago an aquatics feasibility study for the Olympic pool to see essentially what's the condition of the pool. We know it was built to 1970, so it's about 52 years old now. This is what the pool looks like today. It's a 50-meter by 20-yard pool, 6 lanes, has a baby pool, has lobby, restrooms, pump room, pavilion, some shade structures, high and a low dive, and that's essentially it. So like I said, the EIC funded the study in 2018. We issued a RFQ to issue and work with Marmon Mock via a professional services agreement. And what we found was that the current building code is not up to date for the facility. It was built prior to the accessibility code in the 90s. We have accessibility issues. That facility is not accessible according to the ADA law. We have maintenance needs. The pool needed to be replastered, and we actually already did that. We had some leaks we had to address that were pretty significant. We addressed those already. We replaced some of the major equipment in the pool pump room components a couple of years ago. If we did not do this under an emergency repair approved by the council, we probably would not have been able to open the pool for that season. There was demand for competitive pool, both a natatorium and outdoor recreation competitive pool, and also demand for rec and leisure features. And I'll show you what that means in a minute. And demand for program growth. They want to see more swim lessons, they want to see kayak classes, they want to see more water aerobics, all sorts of rec and leisure aquatics programming. So some of the existing conditions at the pool today, again, it's an old building, it's not compliant. The building space is not functional. We don't have HVAC over there, so if you can imagine working outside in the summer, their poor lifeguards are out there on their stand all day, and they come inside and they can't even get cooled off. They kind of jump in the pool to cool down and drink cold water, but they don't have access to HVAC. We have very inadequate storage space, as you can see. There's no designated first aid area. We perform first aid daily at the pool. So we're doing that in front of the public because there's nowhere for staff to take them and care for their nosebleeds or their injuries. Like I said, the restrooms, we have accessibility issues. Nothing about this facility is accessible. There's pool tank issues. We had to repair cracks. We had to redo the plaster. The mechanical equipment is reaching its surface life. And here's some pictures of that. And like I said, we did replace some of this equipment within the last couple of years to get us through until we can do some major renovations there. So we did do an extensive public input process. This project was very popular to our community, and the input meetings were pretty packed, as you can see from the pictures. We explained what was going on at the pool and then gave the opportunity for the public to provide feedback. And here are the desired programs and features that was a result of the public input process. They want slides, more activities like volleyball, water volleyball, a natatorium, which is an indoor pool, a lazy river, zero entry depth, so that means there's no barrier there. It gently goes down kind of like a beach entry into the pool, a spray ground, and more extensive kiddie pool and play structure areas. So with all of that feedback, this came back at a basically $30 million facility concept, and those costs are from 2019. Those have not been updated numbers for that option. We knew we couldn't afford that, so we went back to our consultants and said, hey, what can you do to phase this? What does it look like to update for code issues, for maintenance issues, and maybe do a year-round competitive program? And so we came back with option A, which are new updated cost numbers as of a couple of weeks ago. And so what this option would do is to basically make this a year-round outdoor heated pool. It would update the pump room. It would add a locker room for swim team purposes. It would address the building issues, replace the pool deck, add bulkheads, add spectator seating and a new entrance, add HVAC in the finishes, and update all of the maintenance issues at the pool. So to do that sort of a project, you're looking at $5.35 million to $5.85, and there's a 3% escalator cost for over 3 years. That's where you get those numbers from. Any questions on the pool?
So the idea here is that it'd be used for competitive swimming
Yes.
events and diving events? Would that be collegiate, high school?
It could be both. It could be both. We've talked to both Schreiner University and KIC, and they're both interested in competitive swim programs.
Does Schreiner not have a competitive swim pool?
They do not. They have a very small pool that does not meet the swim requirements. More of a recreation pool. Okay.
Yeah.
And KISD does not have a pool. If y'all are wondering, they don't have a swim program, but they're looking to develop one. Okay, moving on to Singing Wind Park. So this park just had a master plan created for it pursuant to the adoption of the Parks Master Plan. Had some very specific action items out of Kerrville 2050 and the Parks Master Plan. And so this was adopted just recently in September. We went through fast and furious as soon as our Parks Master Plan was updated. We went back to the public and said, hey, Singing Wind Park was the #1 identified park for the next round of improvements. Let's see what feedback you have. And we had a very well engaged community, and they provided great feedback for that park. And this is essentially what it resulted in, a snapshot of 4 different zones. The entire master plan's on our website if you're interested in seeing it. But essentially, the master plan calls for repurposing 2 of the 3 softball fields, and we've actually already have done that in transition. We've taken 2 of the fields and transitioned them into dog park, and then softball field number 1 closest to the playground needs some improvements. Sports court, open space, a pavilion, restroom improvements, building improvements, trail improvements, skate park improvements and expansion, a spray ground, a disc golf course, relocating the gas line. We would have to work with Atmos on that as it runs through the park itself. Lighting improvements throughout, parking improvements and accessibility, a bike facility, extension of Olympic Drive, and the evaluation of running effluent water through the park so we can irrigate with effluent water instead of potable water. So those estimated costs came in between $5 to $8 million, depending on the range and the scale of each project piece for Singing Wind Park. Again, it would be pursuant to funding. Right now, we're accomplishing the low-hanging fruit items. What can we do within our current budget? We can add benches, we can add trash cans, we can do minor dog park improvements. We can't do the major improvements within our operating budget. Okay, any questions on Singing Wind before I move on to the golf course, the last topic?
How much are those softball fields used now?
Very rarely. We have one regular user group that uses it for practice, senior softball, and then they play their games at the sports complex. But since the sports complex has been built and operating, most of the activity is now at the sports complex. Good question. Okay, last topic is Scott Schreiner Golf Course. And this is a picture of last year's Heart of the Hills tournament. It was our 75th anniversary tournament there, and so we sprayed the grounds and had this cool picture taken, which I thought was pretty neat. Okay, again, Kerrville 2050 support for the golf course, Parks Master Plan support for the golf course, which I'm about to talk about these projects. So the course was built in 1924, so we're about to roll into our 100th anniversary of operating the course. The greens were last replaced in 1999, so they're about 23 years old. They're outdated. They're about the end of their lifespan. Golf greens are usually good for about 15 to 18 years. We have several dead spots and problem areas due to the past 2 freezes and the drought. We have drainage issues with the sand bunker. The restrooms are old and outdated. They're dysfunctional, not accessible, and then in need of maintenance. The netting system is old and torn, creating a safety issue. And the maintenance area parking is not paved, and we have drainage issues. So what we recommend, and I'll show you some pictures here in a second, are doing a greens and bunkers replacement and remodeling the restroom, paving the parking lot, and replacing the netting system. So how many of you are golfers, just by curiosity? Okay, so y'all are probably familiar with what I'm about to show you. So these are the current conditions of the greens and the sand bunkers. This is kind of what I'm talking about. We have some encroachment of the undesirable grasses. We have dead spots. We have problem areas. We have drainage areas with our sand bunkers. Every time it rains, when we do get rain, it takes hours of staff labor to go out there and rework the sand and address the drainage issue. Several of the drainage lines are actually under the greens, so we do recommend that doing these projects consecutively together, because when the greens are open up, it just makes the most sense to get in there and work on those drains. The restrooms, here's a couple pictures of the restrooms. They're old, they're outdated, they're not accessible. We have plumbing issues in the walls, they're not insulated, so we have issues when it freezes. There's no heater and fans, there's no doors. We have vandalism out there. Now we're seeing transients out there as well, taking advantage of the somewhat shelter there. And then we're starting to receive more and more complaints on the bathrooms and the conditions of them. And here's some couple pictures of the maintenance area and the parking lot that we recommend paving as well for our staff. The netting system out there as well, obviously it's a safety issue, but there's holes in it. They're old, it's an old system, so we recommend going in and replacing the netting system and with actual poles and not the wooden poles, metal poles. Okay, so costs. Overall, approximate cost would be about $1.23 million for all of these. The greens itself and the sand bunker improvements, that would be about $1 million. The netting system improvements is about $125. The small restroom improvements would be $25. Paving would be about 50, and Starter Shack, which I did not include pictures of, but that would be improvements to Starter Shack out there. It's a very old building. That would be about 30,000 as well. And so, again, those are some of the projects that we've identified that are council priorities and also priorities of our department. And I'm happy to answer any further questions you have.
And Scott Schreiner, how much do you think if we did these improvements in revenue, do you think you could generate by increasing fees?
So we've been slowly increasing fees the last couple of years, $1 here, $1 there. And so we've been doing really well with that incremental fee increase. We anticipate seeing maybe a 20% revenue loss while we're under construction if this project were to take place. But on the flip side, with having new greens, that typically brings in more traffic too. So we do anticipate traffic going up 20 to 25% after that, or even higher.
Does the golf course lose money every year?
It does
Not anymore.
Not anymore.
So
It
I guess
operates
where I
on
was
that.
going with that is, I mean, in an ideal world, you'd want to be able to have fund a sinking fund or something to be able to repair and, redo the greens and things as needed. Is that not been the history?
No, that's a good question.
The golf course didn't make money until the last 2 years, isn't that right?
That's correct.
This year it's being brought into the parks. It was its own standalone.
Correct. The city hasn't had, in my opinion, the city hadn't had a great track record, not at the golf course, but at any of their facilities of doing sink funds to anticipate future repairs. The first one I know of that we pushed it through on was the cultural center. That budget, we had them budget in a yearly amount. to set
Oh,
aside future
the Heart of the Hills Heritage Center?
Heritage Center. excuse
Yeah,
me.
for maintenance.
But that's the first time I know that the city's, and I may be wrong, but
No, the challenge in that is you're always up against a budget, right? And what are you gonna charge the fees and how much are you gonna raise those? And that determines your sinking fund, with all the other costs associated with it, so.
And we also live in a community that is very, if we have money on hand, why isn't it already spent? Okay, I mean, that's a perceptual issue, but I mean, I think there's a conservatism there that speaks to the way that probably we've set up the way that we do things over time, over the years.
It's also been a challenge for me, Greg, and less so with the golf course because it's a break even, close to anyway. But I struggle with the swim center because it literally is a money hole. Because what do we charge to go swimming in it for a day?
$1 a person.
So you go swimming for $1.
The golf course operated, you're correct, Councilmember Clarkson, independently and moved under the Parks and Recreation Department in FY20. And since then, we made some changes and increased fees and leadership changes and changes in operation. And the golf course is now considered successful. It was neglected for decades. It hasn't been budget and infrastructure improvements has not been planned for until it's come under our purview, and that's exactly what we're doing now. Is we're planning for those deferred maintenance issues.
And can you recap, because I know the EIC did a grant for the golf course a few years ago, and maybe that was just the pro shop and the parking area or whatever, but was there anything actually done to the golf course itself in that? And how much was that?
I'm not sure I can speak to that, but if you're talking about the pro shop renovations, that was done in, I believe, like 2008-ish time area,
2013.
or 2013?
2013, I got golf course improvements at $518,568
We
from
redid
y'all.
the parking lot.
Oh, the parking lot.
Parking
And
lot.
there's some bathroom work as well,
Yeah.
if
In
I'm
the
not
pro shop.
mistaken.
Interior in the pro shop, we did some bathroom
Yeah,
work.
and
I
then on
don't
the
remember
back side of the golf course, the bathroom, so there was like an actual bathroom
Added
back there.
that patio area.
So,
Yeah, the pro shop.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
so we're
a
not
$500,000.
recommending doing any improvements to the pro shop at this time.
let's see, is there
Any other?
So that's the big list of quality of life projects that we kind of currently have right now. from a standpoint, you guys have any more questions for her?
And just for note purposes, just to recap, the totals kind of on those projects, the pool is about 5 million for that. And then Singing Winds Park was about 5 also,
Between 5 to 8.
5 to 8, and then 1.2 for the golf. Thank you.
Sure.
And I will say that coming from Palestine, Texas, where we had kind of a weird YMCA agreement with the city and the YMCA, we had a pool there, and it was always a challenge for the council to kind of figure out what the best rate was, because usually you're trying to think of those who can least afford it, and treat it almost as if it's a community asset like the park, right? Where a park is essentially just a sunk cost, and the hard part with that is you can mostly get away with the park. You know, you maintain the grounds, the grass, the sidewalks. You know, there's a cost associated with that. But when you have a pool, well, that's a big expense, can be. So trying to weigh the cost benefit of what are you going to charge folks versus, you know, what is the capital need, upgrades for that. So as you can see on the quality of life, we've got any number of projects that we need to work towards finding funding for. The natatorium portion, I think that's a larger conversation with multiple agencies, right? So with Shriner University, with Tybee, and trying to figure out what's the best fit, how does that best work for their budgets, for our needs, what kind of interlocal agreements can we enter into. But I would imagine if that scope is, you know, there's probably going to be a gap in there somewhere, and somebody's going to come asking the EIC for maybe us to help with that last mile on something. So we're hopeful about the conversations. I think everybody's been positive towards that. How that works out, I think we still don't know.
But this, I know we're not to an half stage I know we're not there.
Yeah.
But is it the city's expectation that EIC would fund 100% of these projects?
No. I think the city's expectation is that, I think, you know, part of what we discussed when Greg and Danny and I met was just to kind of, what are all the things that we're looking at?
I'm just curious about the expectation. So.
No, I think the expectation that I understand it, and Councilwoman Clarkson, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that a lot of times it's, you know, can the EIC help get to the last mile, right? Or 80% there, you know, can EIC help work towards that? Not to say that some of them won't be a full-blown ask.
No, I get it. I just.
All of it.
Yeah, and you know, because you've been at those planning sessions, we don't, as a council, take it to that level. I mean, it's really, we don't talk about funding sources at those meetings.
I understand. It's a wish list, and I get that.
Yeah.
I would like to see, I've said this before, I just don't want to see the EIC become the piggy bank.
Fully understand.
Yeah, and I don't think, you know, because you've sat in this chair down there, but I don't think the council looks at it that way either. I think it's just these are things that are priorities for council, and then we'll all somehow figure it out together. Not we're going to hand these over to
No,
you.
that's all. It's all great
Yeah.
information.
Yep.
Thanks for bringing that. That was informative for me.
So with that being,
Do this every year. We're going through our budget, initial budgets, to get this kind of update. Just kind of see what other things are out there, because it helps me kind of think about
what to
cash
expect,
When
and
does the
funding and where we may need
EIC
to
year
put money.
start? When does the EIC year start?
same as council.
Yeah, so it would be
Yeah.
right in that same time period. And I'll say, like, for example, with the Parks Master Plan, that hadn't been approved until after priorities had been set. So you won't see that in the list for this year because of the timing on that. So none of that was built into this year's asks or thoughts as well. But I like that idea too.
So as we move into the next budget cycle, which once we get done with the audits, we're back to the budget cycle again. So Julie seems to never be done with either budget or audit. I think what I'd like to see the body consider is back in, I think, 2017 or 2018, worked through kind of a, you know, here's the plan of action for the next couple of years for EIC. I think it would benefit me to at least kind of have an updated discussion of that next budget cycle. however that looks for the board. Just kind of vision that stuff out. And I think talk through these projects, these priorities. I mean, obviously council has to come up with their priority lists before EIC can really discuss what to consider. I would think you'd want to have kind of their priority lists of what's important and their policies and their programs before we'd really talk through EIC's projects necessarily, because I would think y'all would want to be in alignment, right? But I would like to have that as a part of the budget discussions with EIC in the future. One of the other things that I saw the other day was a capital improvements project that was kind of a sort of the facade program. EIC used to have $100,000 in that every year.
Yep.
Yeah, this was a while ago.
Never spent it.
And never got spent. And so I came from Live Oak, which had a visual improvement program, which essentially had $100,000 in it to discuss the same kind of thing, upgrades to the facades of the buildings to kind of put some shine back on, and applications would come through. But I'm sorry, I've gotten off track here. Looking back at all the projects that you had from 1999 to now, there's been a ton of infrastructure projects that have been a part of the success of Kerrville, right? I think that now that we have an updated water and wastewater master plan, City Council got a really good, 50,000 foot view about what those priority lists are. And when I look in that list, I think in talking with Public Works and talking with engineering and with EA, Knapp Road, Force Main, Knapp Road interceptors are kind of a big project. So that's stuff that's heading west out to Ingram. There's some capacity issues out there from a sewer standpoint that really slows down the development. Both think about Yogi Bear Park, right? Big hotel driver here in town. They have some limitations as far as how much they can develop. And a lot of that has to do with the sewer capacity out there. Second area, kind of we wanted to focus this just on a few areas because there's so many, but we really don't know, like I said, that crystal ball of where this stuff is going to phase to. The second area was Water Street improvements. So downtown hotel has been a discussion for a long time. Really was hard and heavy until COVID hit and slowed everything down. Improvements and upgrades to anything on Water Street that is both water and sewer really are going to help drive a lot of those conversations with the developers, because they certainly do all come with an ask right now. No matter what project it is, every single one of them has an ask. So the improvements to the regional infrastructure for downtown at Water Street really can be crucial to helping push a project kind of over the line. Knowing that I don't know how much we want to increase those pipe sizes without something on the hook, that would be a really interesting project because of the potential developments for downtown. And I know everybody has discussed downtown hotels here in this meeting and kind of out in the community. So we continue to have those conversations, and it's not just that development of hotels down there, it's other developments in downtown that are limited because of the capacity of the infrastructure that we have there, right? So increases to water lines specifically with regards to downtown will help out. And so Knapp Road out there west of town, downtown, Water Street infrastructure, both water and sewer. And then lastly, areas out by Tybee. So EIC's already incentivized that portion of land that is out there. And one of the things that we're seeing is that there's probably some capacity issues out there that we're going to need developers to upgrade, but there's going to be upgrades that are beyond what I think we would require of them. And one of the questions from EA's standpoint is it worthwhile to consider making those upgrades to the future kind of capacity needs that we would have from like a water pump standpoint, because water is an issue out there at the Travis pump station, that would help incentivize that and speed up that process out there. And so those are kind of the three. Knapp Road considerations, Water Street considerations, and kind of Tybee High School, middle school area considerations from a water and sewer standpoint. I know it's a little vague.
Michael, when you talk about Knapp Road, you mentioned the Yogi Bear facility, but Knapp Road, is that the landing area?
See, it's the other side. I always get confused by that too. It's the Chili's side.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
All right.
Yeah, because it
Yeah.
crossed. Yeah.
I that always every
I knew it
single
was
time,
west,
right?
but I wasn't sure which side of the river.
Y'all owe it. Thank you for.
No, because I always think of Knapp Road and I do exactly the same thing and have to remember Knapp Road extends all the way through, and that's where the infrastructure that needs assistance is.
So there's quite a few city projects that are going to be related to the water and sewer rates that are going to drive those projects, and we have plans for those that we know we need to do that are going to be maintenance. Nobody's asking EIC to pony up any money for that, but I think if we were to look at some areas and you wanted to consider that, those are probably some of the prime locations where we'll see residential development coupled with commercial development. I think over by Tybee High School, the ability to expand over on 20 or over west going towards Ingram out there, and that would be kind of the Knapp Road area, and then downtown for the reasons we discussed. So with that, I'll turn it back over if y'all have any more questions about that.
Anybody have anything else? All right, we'll move on to item 6A. Consider project funding agreement between the City of Kerrville, EIC, and the City of Kerrville, Texas for the development and construction of an extension to the city's river trail from Tranquility Island Bridge to the scenic downtown overlook.
So last month we had a public hearing on this item. There was a discussion amongst the members that were here to postpone the vote on that until everybody on the board could be in attendance. I think unless you all really want to see the presentation again, I think we could forgo that. You tell me what you want to do, Mr. Richards. But it's essentially that downtown portion that is that first phase that would get us from Tranquility Island down to basically the overlook portion of that. And that funding started when May of last year. The budget for that was $800,000. To date, that new projection is at just about $1 million. The requests from city staff based on the recommendations from council on their priority list was to ask EIC to fund that portion of it. We had a healthy discussion about this item and the next item, which is kind of the westward expansion of the river trail, and so based on the motion to kind of table and discuss this today with the full board, we brought it back and ready to take any direction from.
So remind me I know the project from
Mark, can you pull that item up, 6A?
Tranquility Island to G Street was, I think, phased in 3 phases? Is that right?
4 sections, with phase 1 being sections 1 and 2. And then sections 3 and 4 would be the other phase that would basically go from the overlook or Shriner 1 all the way down to the connection with Shriner University.
So what this project that we're looking at is for phase 1, which is the first 2.
Right there. Yeah, the first 2 sections.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that initial estimated cost that we got from Mr. Hewitt, who is here in the audience today, was $800,000, and now that estimate is just about at $1 million.
I want to clarify one thing on the council side of things.
Yes, ma'am.
Because it was part of the questioning of the last meeting, and it's just that the council priority for the river trail extension was just given to us in that way. And what I heard Ashley saying today was that was a community priority. But as far as a discussion on a council level about where the actual location of the extension it was to go, we didn't have a roundtable about that. That was just really something that was provided to us as information and direction.
So more generic and not specific.
I mean, in my way of thinking, because we didn't sit down and say, well, we didn't go back to any plans, or we didn't go back to any any updated plans, or we didn't, it was future extensions of the river trail, and that was the one that was laid out. So just some clarification on that as well.
Absolutely. So one of the questions that came up and the concerns, and both Kyle, Ashley, myself, and Mr. Hewitt were discussing quite a bit was the boardwalk portion, right? So where this would have gone from Tranquility Island down on the river all the way down to the overlook. That phase was just kind of a singular at its base portion. One of the requests from that came to Mr. Hewitt was for the third and fourth phase, would it be feasible to bring that trail once it gets closer to its end back up to MHDD, so you have a trail that goes all the way up to downtown and then kind of comes back down towards that, what is that section of buildings called? That
Yes,
River Guide Village, right there. And it would come down there, and it would essentially be, here's the Riverside portion, here's that portion from MHDD, and they would connect down there, and that would be the two. Our understanding, and I was trying to find some documentation on it, plans or projects, but that it kind of died on the vine because the cost of that portion was just too expensive to go from there up to the top. And so I know that was part of the discussion, and we didn't have enough information, I think, to present back to you. I certainly didn't. And so the proposal was just for that bottom portion that came back in May. So just wanted to clarify that part in one of those questions. I know
Yeah, we've got one speaker to speak on this. Before we do that, anybody have any questions of Michael? No? All right, who's our speaker?
Katie Capper.
Good evening, I'm Katie Capel. I am a member of a group called the Texas Outdoor Women's Network for Kerrville for the last year. We have 233 members who are walking the trail a couple of times a week. When I saw this proposal, I thought, why? We already have a trail that goes to G Street, which we go on all the time. We kayak out there, and I'm really wondering whether you've got a realistic assessment of cost, because that thing's a cliff. And everybody that has a building like such as the Arcadia is up on the end of the cliff. So are we going to burrow into the cliff in order to build this trail? And then when I heard the rest of the proposals, I thought, why don't we save this $1 million and put it into some of the others? I do support the loop that goes around the lake. Perhaps if the trail were extended more to the west, we could divert some of that bicycle traffic that comes in on Easter out of Louise Hayes Park down to a further extension of the trail. I'm not sure exactly who this spur is supposed to serve, because at first I thought, well, why do we want people from going up the trail up to the overlook? There's only a couple of restaurants, and usually when you're walking the trail, you're not going shopping. Or maybe we're supposed to park up there and then you can get to the trail that way as an access to the trail. But it seems to me a lot of work and a lot of expense to put that trail on this other side of the river when we already have the trail that goes to G Street, which we use all the time. I'm very supportive of all of these other projects that the Parks Department would like to do. I just don't get the point of this one. And I know you're pretty far along. Do you have easements from all the people that own the property along there that you're going to burrow underneath the cliff, underneath their buildings? I don't know that part. I did want to mention, though, with regard to the pool, as long as I'm up here, the Salvation Army has raised the fees. It costs $5.50 to take your child to that pool now, $8.50 for an adult. As a grandmother, I used to be able to bring my grandchildren in free. But I think the Independence pool is $1. So I think there's some possibilities that you could work something where we could get some of those improvements, because the population that's going to the Salvation Army has dropped off quite a bit. So there I am. I would like to see an extension of the river trail. I'd like to see it go to Flat Rock Park, but perhaps it could go from Shriner to Flat Rock Park rather than trying to deal with all that cliff area along the base of the city. And I say this because I'm out there all the time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say, I think we had 5 speakers at the hearing last meeting. And they closely echoed what she just said, her feelings on it. Everybody loves the trail. Everybody used the trail. But everybody was questioning, why are we doing this and not going somewhere else? Because we do have trail in the area. Now, if that's, someone else remembers different, please correct me, but that's my recollection of the 5 other speakers we had. Very similar comments to this one. No one was dead set against it. I'm not saying that, but they were just kind of questioning, why are we spending the money there and not doing something else with the money, which is what generated the question about going west and why we got the proposal to maybe pay for an engineering study to see what it would cost to go west. That's where all that came from, was that discussion there. So
I've got to go back to the 2050 plan. It was public driven. This is the master plan that was set up. This is what the people wanted it to do. I am not opposed to moving west. And my proposal is, let's fund this and let's get started on the next segment. We've got the money to do it. I'd rather have it poured in concrete here than sitting in a commercial paper somewhere. That's me personally. Is it the sexiest section of the trail that we're going to do? Probably not. But if we're going to complete the master plan, it's got to be done. So that would be my wish, is let's go forward with this, because we've already spent a bunch of money on it. It's part of the 2050 plan. It meets the master plan lineup. And let's immediately get started doing the study to what's it going to cost to go to the next go west. Because at best case, we're 2 years.
It's going to be a phased process for sure, and we'll talk about that the next item. But I mean, it's a phased process. I think you just,
But you got to get the easements. You've got to do the engineering. You've got to get the construction drawings done. So I mean, it's not like we could say, well, let's go west and we're going to break ground in 3 months.
I think the timelines are going to be probably a little long. Well, I don't know. I can't speak to Mr. Hewitt's going to be able to speak to that, as far as a timeline for the study, but figure at least the same amount of time as we had on the last study so that was from Christmas or November of 20, I think. And then in May, the study came back. So that was 6 months from the time of saying yes to the study coming back. So it was 6 months. You want to speak to, we're going to speak to that item next.
yeah, let me say, I don't think we're talking about spending $1 million. You're not going to do phase 1 and not do phase 2.
No, eventually, sure.
Well, so you're talking about at least spending $4 million now, because you're going to commit to both of them. So this is not just phase 1. We're committing to, if we didn't do phase 2,
There's no reason.
there is no reason to do phase 1.
I don't disagree with that.
So I think we're talking about the whole thing. I don't think we're just talking about $1 million for phase 1. We're talking about the whole thing from G Street down to Tranquility, is my mind. And that, it's 18 months for phase 1, and you start phase 2, and that's 24 months. And in 16 months, the costs have gone up 28% from the original estimate. How much more do you think is going to go up in the next 40 months with the inflation we've got going on right now? It's going to be a lot more than that, in my opinion. And I just don't think it's worth it. I'd rather go fix the pool, or fix Shriner Golf Course, or try to go out west. And now I'm going to shut up. And I certainly am not in favor of it until we find out what it might cost to go west before we did that. So,
Well, I have, just like everybody else, I live here, I use the trail, I enjoy the trail, and envisioning this additional segment, I have a personal opinion, a personal preference about the trail location as a consumer of the trail, but that's not really what I view my role is up here to vote. Is that where I would prefer to have the trail? I'm thinking in terms of cost. I'm thinking in terms of economic benefit to whomever, whether there's any downtown merchant benefit whatsoever to having this trail. And honestly, I don't see a lot. I look at the cost per foot of the additional trail. What does that open up that we don't already have? And I don't see much incremental value. $1 million is not going to make or break us, but it goes a long way towards doing some significant things. And as we just heard from Ashley, there's a lot of significant amenities, quality of life projects, and even on sort of a scale down, what's practical. I mean, we're still up, $1 million or $10 to $15 million in projects there, and that doesn't even include any additional river trail expansion, which I think all of us would like to try to see us do. It's going to be a lot of money to go around Nimitz Lake. It's going to be a lot of money. I don't know what that number is. I'm sure we'll hear, but it's going to be a lot of money. And I have a hard time whether it's $1 million or $4 million, taking money away from going towards something that really, in my view, doesn't add a lot. So I'm opposed to it. I think from what input we've heard here, those sentiments seem to be shared by those that have shown up and voiced their opinion about it. So I'm opposed to it.
I'm really trying to be as balanced on this as I can. To Danny's point, it's expensive, it's gotten more expensive. So would y'all see basically modifying the master plan to completely remove that segment and never do it?
I don't know that that's our call to make.
We're basically taking it on to change the master plan by not going with the recommendations from staff and from the 2050 plan. So and I think that does come into play, that because if we kick the can down the road another 5 years, what's it going to cost then, Danny? A lot more than it does today, and I don't disagree with that. So I would say I haven't made my mind up yet. I need to know if we're fundamentally saying that we don't want to fund that section of the river trail, then I think that has different implications. That's got to go to a bigger picture than what we get to decide.
Yeah, we're not the master planning committee. I think we're stewards of a significant funding resource for the community for this and other projects, both quality of life, infrastructure, and economic development. And so, as a steward, I want to see us get the most bang for the buck. And I don't know that this is not the most bang for the buck. I mean, more river trail the better as far as I'm concerned, but we don't get a lot with this $1 million worth of spending. So I have no problem keeping it in the plan, and at some point down the road when we've checked off all the other boxes that whatever board is made up decides is the highest priority and they want to spend the money on, then we can come back to it if we want. But I don't see this as being something that we get much out of the money that we're spending on.
I have two questions. Are there going to be any easement issues for this particular phase?
So as you can see on there, we have 5 city-owned easements, or 5 properties that are city-owned, but there's 13 properties in total. I don't foresee there to be any issues. Ashley, you might be able to speak to this, or Mr. Hewitt, you might be able to speak to this better than we can. Right?
I'll just give a little history on why the EA and the staff asked me to go this direction. Was because they had most of the easements in place, and they thought it was a affordable option. So when you say that this option's $1 to $4 million, our original thought is that on the north side of the lake, you're looking at maybe $8 million for that section. The south side of the lake would be on the order of $12 million. So, I mean, the others aren't in the same price range as this. The other problem is that there's some easement concerns on those other sections as well. And on the south side, there's some cultural issues where there's some Indian mittens or burial grounds that have been identified. So there's other obstacles on those routes as well. So the original thought was this was the low-hanging fruit section to build. So that's what went into some of that.
So I know we're going to have the second item, right, as a part of this discussion of whether or not to come back and ask for an actual, cost breakdown from Mr. Hewitt. I think, they are all going to cost more than we ever expected them to cost, right? I don't benefit from the history that most of you all have. You do have some ability to fund more than one project, right? That's your purview. You are right now. But we stand ready to take direction from the board, right? There 20 years worth of projects altogether when it comes to the river trail, because I think it's going to be, an interesting concept getting all the way around, right, the lake. And that's not a tomorrow project. And that's going to be certainly I would say phase one would get you to maybe to Knapp Road. Or Knapp Road boat ramp. I don't know if it would get you quite that far, but that would be kind of that's the natural tie-in if we can get that far. Historically, in the past, there were some challenges with some of the easements, and I think we'd have to get creative, but that's, for Mr. Hewitt and his folks to kind of make determinations on how we could do that. But that was 13 years ago, or 14 years ago, when that was first discussed. Ownership has changed hands, might be changing hands, some new conversations to be had as we move forward. I had to go back and look at all the history of it and spent hours kind of rifling through notes of this, notes of that, what happened here. There certainly were some challenges going west in the past of, well, my neighbor's not necessarily on board, so I'm only on board if my neighbor's on board, kind of thing. But that was 14-year-old conversation. And so, anyway, that is the next item. I know we're kind of conflating the two, but I think that as Mr. Hewitt said, the low-hanging fruit was this.
Well, I'd like to ask Ashley to give us some perspective on the benefit of this particular segment and how you see that adding value to the overall river trail system.
Sure. Well, it provides accessibility and to the opposite side of the river, to downtown connectivity. Events, it opens up the ability to add more 5Ks and opportunities for different sorts of events on the river trail. We see a lot of people coming in to when we have large scale events in the park, like July 4th, Riverfest, our Halloween event, we see lots of folks trying to get from the parking garage down to the park. We see them crossing the footbridge and kind of crossing through the dirt area between some of those properties are not city owned, by the way, behind Louise Hayes Park, and trespassing through that area too. And so that would create also a legal transportation path for people to get down into the park and to get to the events and to the amenities that we have too.
Well, one other thing that I see as a user of the river trail is to me it's more about kind of the beauty of the environment, being able to get out in it. It's not so much a place for me to get from point A to point B, because usually wherever I start, that's where I'm going to end. And if I can make a loop, so much the better. And I've walked that section of beneath all those buildings, and it's horrible. It's not attractive. And when you think about the improvements that have been made to the park overall since the river trail began, I mean, they're monumental. And having a beautiful walkway down there that just gives you another pretty path to walk, I think just adds to the benefit of the river trail.
I'll throw my 2 cents in too. I've had discussions with a number of businesses downtown, and as I'm sit on the board of the Arcadia Theater as well. And both of these gentlemen down here have made very sound arguments as to whether this moves the needle on value. It's hard to say. To me, it's more a little bit about vision. We've talked about hotels downtown. We've talked about access to the river from that side. Both of the sites that I'm at least aware of for potential hotels in the future run along this phase. So if that backs up to the river trail being down there already, I think that's a plus that a hotelier might see. I think we need to have a little bit of vision. I know all of the area behind the Arcadia and all the shops there on Water Street is being renovated and updated. So the backside of that building and all that parking area that's kind of trashed cans and dumpsters right now, we actually had a proposal on the Arcadia board come before us on funding a new trash receptacle back there that's rock and prettied up. So I think they're going to improve all that area that's actually being done now. There's a bunch of work being done back there. So all of those things are being turned towards the river. Having a river trail down below there just adds to that value, I think. So we need to be able to see what the potential is. And I know we're not the Riverwalk in San Antonio, but something like that, having restaurants having access to the river from that side, grape juice. I know the Busted Sandals having some trouble with that brewery that they're trying to put in downtown. Is also going to have a backside there too, with seating outside. So there's lots of things that are going in there. And if we have a river trail down there, I just think it's a bonus. My opinion.
All right, we need to either make a motion or move on.
Wow. I'm gonna make a motion that we approve the project funding agreement with the City of Kerrville and the EIC for the development and construction of the extension of the river trails. City River Trail from Tranquility Island Bridge to the scenic downtown Overlook Pavilion.
Second.
A motion and a second. We've had plenty of discussion, but if there's anybody else that has any other comments, let's share them now. Otherwise, all those approved, raise your hand. And those opposed. Motion carries 4-2. All right, our next item on the agenda is consider the concept feasibility study for an extension of the river trail around Nimitz Lake.
Good afternoon. It's been, as Michael and others have mentioned, it's been an extensive amount of time trying to find the history of this. Mr. Appel had mentioned the $6 million bond. I knew that there was also $500,000 because this was the first project that I did, was the Nature Center to Tranquility Island. So in 2002, there was a bond issuance that included $500,000 for that initial phase, with what was called Package A, Phase 1. I mean, it had a whole slew of different names in the little bit over 10 years that I've been here. So then in 2008, Half Associates did the conceptual design. That's what the $500,000 started to include. Get a little more in depth of what we've got. I do have, later in the slides, I do have that initial master plan concept. So it was a 5-phase approach in 2011. In 11-12, there was the $6 million bond allocation to begin the construction of the river trail. In 2012, the city hired Hewitt Engineering. We did the first segment down from the Nature Center to Tranquility Island. The discussion on why we did not go west, as was mentioned before, was constructability issues as well as easement. We had really one Nature Center, and they're a good partner with the city. TxDOT was really not much of an issue. They were actually real receptive of us getting under that right of way at that point because it was cleaning things up a little bit. So then that kicked everything off. We had subsequent phases after that. So that 4.5 miles that was done. I really say $6 million was really 6.5 through bond allocation. We got 4.5 miles for $6.5 million. And then in 19, we did the Shriner portion, and then the River Trail Master Plan was also adopted in 2019. So moving forward, so it's kind of hard to see, but here's that initial concept plan, all the way from KSP to Thompson. This was the 6-mile discussion. This did not really have any idea at this point, from what I saw through the files, of any easement acquisitions, conflicts that we might come into. This was just about this high level. Where do we want it to go? And so that later transposed into this. As we've built more trail, there's more interest in building more trail. So now we're both sides of the river. We've got several little tributaries shown. Shriner University Sports Complex. So again, what we have before you is to look at that segment around basically where we stop at the Dietert Center, connecting all the way back to at least Francisco Lemos. We would consult with Mr. Hewitt to develop a scope. Roughly, $200,000 is what I anticipate that segment being. As he alluded to earlier, we have archaeological issues. There's going to be a number of easements that he's going to have to look through. We've been getting some throughout the years as development comes along. The Raising Cane's development, I'm trying to remember the gentleman that owned that. We got trail easement through there. So there is some easement acquisition, but the original master plan still had the Family Sports Center. Pete Moore with that property, as you well know, that's not there anymore. So let's re-engage that discussion if we're going to move westward. That's even just as Mr. Hornitz mentioned, just getting to Knapp Road, or we'll say Knapp Park, so on the north side, from where we ended at the Dietert Center to Knapp Park behind Raising Cane's. That could be segment one. We'll let him delineate the differences and the conflicts that we have. This is just a breakdown of what we had in the town concept that would also fall into this, basically the Nimitz Lake concept study. What's it going to take to get around the lake? $20 million in construction is what Mr. Hewitt and I have kind of talked about, of what we anticipate. That's on today dollars. You mentioned, the longer we take, the more it's going to cost. We'll have that built in for escalation, as we do with a lot of our master plans. But we've got a number of environmental conflicts. There's properties. If you look at behind Billy Jean's, just as y'all were discussing the downtown segments, we've got actually probably a little bit more of an issue behind the areas along Billy Jean's and moving a little bit westward that we would have to look at. Maybe some boardwalk discussion. Do we go up on the highway? There's going to be some dialogue back and forth to develop a plan. Right now, we just have the 30,000 foot view of the master plan that we want to get from A to B. Yes, ma'am.
All these bullet points that you're talking about, unraveling. So does this get down, if we do a study, does this get down to the level of proposed what we think easement acquisition would cost along with barriers? Or does it, how, when you talk about these, what does that really mean? You're saying we're going to look at all those things.
So what we'll do is look at easement as whether it exists or not. In the past, and John, correct me if I'm wrong on the easement discussion, we don't attribute a cost. So the reason, and I'll give you two examples. The Shriner segment, design and engineering cost of that was 99%. The easement cost was 1%.
Okay.
The previous, the 4.5 miles that we built, 72% was construction, about 16 to 18% was easement. Of that about $6.5 million, that was Rio Robles, and then all those easement acquisitions. So we don't really like to put a price tag on it because we don't know.
So yeah, to speak to that, Kyle had sent me some figures. So it was $6.6 million, $6.63 million, and the easement acquisition part was 837. That's land purchase and easement acquisition, and then 135 for legal for the easement acquisition. So $1 million of that 6.6 was easements, and so that's a good part of it. But it's just any other part of it. I think it's figure that as a less than 10% cost, somewhere between 5 and 7% are going to be added to start figuring out how we can get the easements and the land acquisitions. When I look back at the stuff from '09, a gentleman named Malcolm, who was the knower of all things apparently, had kind of a spreadsheet of, here's the yeses, here's the nos, here's some whys for that, and it was a really interesting read, and so I think it's going to be some good conversations if the board decides to move forward with that. with those landowners. Staff has been pretty diligent about, maybe not requiring, but going through the efforts to acquire those easements as the properties that have developed. And I really think there's some good opportunities. I think Mr. Appel and I were talking about, getting to Knapp Road to the boat ramp. That's a natural progression. I mean, you start down there, you work your way back towards, towards the rest of the river trail. That was kind of the first blush. That was the discussion amongst everybody when the board greenlit paying for a lot of this. Sounds like there was quite a few hurdles through that process to get there. But I'd really like to see us at least, work towards that. But what EA and I discussed was really trying to understand the whole cost of that. What's it going to look like? How's that going to look for us to get all the way around? And so that's the ask of the board today, is to consider
They
taking
ask us to do the entire loop around Nemitz Lake.
well, to get a feasibility to at least get a number from Hewitt on what it would take.
How's your crystal ball, John?
He's a pretty good crystal ball.
No, you saying that originally, way back, it was $12 million
Oh, what's that? What
for
was
the cost to get around the lake?
No, there was never a cost associated with that. The only cost that we had was, as Mr. Appel mentioned in the last meeting, was a $6 million bond to fund river trail construction. And that's, like I said, the expense of what we were able to do on that was Nature Center to KSP. That was about $4.5 million. We had the other, other money tied up, as Mr. Horn has mentioned, in legal fees, land acquisition. A lot of that is continuing to. It's getting better, I will say. If you recall back in 11, 12 timeframe, it was not really good to mention River Trail. Now we've got people speaking in in just numbers that you didn't see back then in favor of the trail. So it's a lot different perspective. Maybe some of those naysayers back then are willing because they use that trail now. So we don't know the easement acquisition part. So putting a number on what that would take is really that's the crystal ball. So
And to your point, the 12 million was on the north side by 27. That's $8 million is the projected cost for completion going to Thompson, and then 12 million projected going back the other way. Just the
Okay, so you're talking about 20 million, which you're back several years ago.
no. This is
that's
now.
Yes,
Not
20
now.
million is the today.
So when you talk about potentially $20 million, this feasibility, would it have phasing?
Yes, it would be very similar to what he had on the previous item where we had the segments, and then we would look at okay, can we take the first 3 segments? Is it just the first one? What's the most feasible option at that point? If we have 10 easements and we're just waiting on one, and that gets us through 3 or 4 segments, our recommendation is going to go ahead and proceed with those 3 or 4 segments. But that's again, that report that we'll bring back to you will have all the identifiers.
What's the estimated cost of the feasibility study?
That's correct.
We said
200,000.
We said it would. We're not sure, but 200
Yeah.
for the whole area.
And that would also include the archaeological consultant that John would hire, environmental. Try to cover every aspect of this that we could.
So, and it's obviously not my area of expertise, and John or Kyle. Since we're talking something that's probably 10 to 15 years out there, is it worth spending the entire amount, or are we better off just doing a feasibility study to Knapp Road or Knapp Park? I mean, and I don't know what the cost savings is to do part of it or do the whole thing, but is it going to really is the feasibility really going to, will it stay on the shelf that long and still be good?
I would think so, because you're not talking about major modifications to that shoreline, that area. That is going to look the same. That width of that area is going to be the same. The type of work isn't likely to change, and so nobody's going to go in there and modify the topography in that floodway between the time we talk about it and the future. they can't really because you can't do any building on there. So same way that y'all had the cost estimates for the phasing from 2021 at 800,000, really it was just an upgrade of the cost estimate based on the material and the labor. I think you would have that for a lot. Now the undeveloped section that between the landing and the water treatment plant, I couldn't tell you. I don't know what that's going to look like over 20 years, but that would be the only section. Everything else is already built in the built environment, pretty much.
And this would be similar to our water wastewater master plans. Those are built out to have our needs assessment done for the here and now. We're not looking to do those. I mean, if you have 180 million to go do a lot of, I see Stuart came in here, so I'll pick on him. The public works improvements that we need. That's probably not even inclusive of what if we really looked at every aspect of it. This gets the governing agencies an idea of, other than just this large view. Okay, what is really our catalyst to build from here to there? It's a little more detailed than just throwing some lines on the board. We do this with development in our master plans. This is what line size we need if development occurs here. Well, if we want to go to Thompson Drive, what are our limitations? What are the environmental limitations? Are there any archaeological on the north side? We know there is on the south. There's going to be some key components that we can possibly lock in now as opposed to later with the Army Corps and any GLO acquisition, stuff like that. So.
With that, we'll turn it back over to you, sir. You got any questions?
So is there, is the easement acquisition piece, is it a kind of a linchpin for the rest of the discussion, or do you just identify, hey, we got 50 property owners, we got 20 that are saying they'd give it, and 30 that said absolutely no way over my dead body, then you just keep moving through the rest of the analysis?
Yeah, that's exactly
Okay.
right.
Curious. So is just so I can clarify, do we have the estimate for the study is 200,000, or we're just talking about it at this point?
Talking about it. We don't know what the estimate's going to be for Mr. Hewitt. He wanted to, I think everybody wanted to make sure that the board was interested in the concept of doing it together before anybody went out of their way to put that all together.
So does this need action, or
if y'all want us to come back to you with an actual formal proposal, then we do need action from the board.
Okay.
This kind of ties in. So this give you a rough approximation of time if you want staff to bring something to you.
Okay.
So we're talking about requesting Mr. Hewitt to do a study, and he would bring us an estimate, and then would approve or disapprove the estimate?
Yes, sir. And then that would go back to council, because this is going to be over $10,000, so this is...
Oh, come on, John.
Unless y'all can talk him down.
I can break it up into phases too, so I can give you a cost if you did it from here to Knapp Road or Knapp Road around the south side. If you wanted to do just.
I mean, you're going to be kind of doing that anyway through the process, so I'd like to see that. If we do it, if the board decides that's what we want to do.
Before we take any action or consideration, we had a speaker signed up for this. Ma'am, did you have anything else you wanted to share?
Yes. I have traveled quite a bit riding bicycles, and there are some states that I've been in where they have a trail that goes all the way around their lake and interspersed with different little hamburger joints and places for people to stop. It seems to me that going west, some of these restaurants down here are going to like to have some kind of an outdoor venue on the trail where they can capture some of the people coming by. And I think that I talked about the bicycle event in the spring, 1,000 bicycle riders. People out there, that's some economic improvement, I think. People from all over travel to different venues to ride their bikes, not to mention all the people that I know that are walking every day. So that's why I'm really interested in this. I think our lake is so undervalued and so underused. I would like to see an archaeological exhibit at the site where the bend is. I know what that happened on 898, where they had to stop their construction because of the Indians. We don't tell anybody about that. Lots of places have, I mean, our nature center is not on the river, but I think we should have some place where people can learn about the river when you're on the trail. We don't have any explanatory signage along the river. This is a really a gem that here exists here in Kerrville with this river, and I don't think we make as much of it as we could.
Thank you. You have something you wanted to share?
Well, I'm just gonna echo Gary's comments. I don't know, you know, and since we're not voting to spend any money right now, I guess it doesn't matter. I hate to ask him to do a bunch of work, but if we're talking about $10 million, we're not gonna spend $10 million anytime soon. And so why should we spend $200,000 to get an answer we know we're already gonna get and know that we're not gonna do anything and just have this sit on the shelf for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 more years? We're gonna be spending money on this one, maybe some other things. I just have that concern. I don't wanna put anybody through a bunch of work.
And I think, you know, my thought on it, Danny, is in having, I guess I'm like Greg, I've been here since day one on the river trail. In fact, that was my first meeting we voted on the bond issue, scared me to death. But my sense is that if we don't keep some momentum moving on this, then I think it'll go away. I think people will say, we got enough, let's quit. And maybe that's what we end up doing. But if we're serious, and it's still part of the city's goal is to continue this, I'd like to see us go ahead and at least do a feasibility study, whether it's the whole one or at least for the next potential phase, whenever that is, whether it's 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road. That's going to give us the next board at least a starting point if they decide to go that direction. But I can go either way. I'm not jumping up and down on this one.
And I think if I'm not mistaken, Mr. Hewitt, what I think you said was if you come back with a proposal, you can even phase your proposal as far as come back and then we have another discussion about how far we want to take it. We're today deciding if we even want to say, do we want to look west? And then next time we say, okay, now we know how much it costs to look west and how much of that do we want to do? Do we want to do the whole thing or do we want to pick out the phases that we want to engineer, look at engineering and go from there?
And I think that's the staff stance. We didn't want to presume, so we asked, just kind of a rough number. Here's what this would look like if I was to do a conceptual study all the way around the lake. There's merit to that, but obviously that's the board's purview, right? And I think, Danny, to your point, the sections, just that section on the north side, if you went all the way to Thompson, that would be $8 million, which I don't think anybody's thinking that that's all going to get taken as one big chunk right away. From a staff standpoint, the same way that we just phased these downtown sections, we would come back with, hey, these are phased approaches to get from here to here. Get from here to here. It's the art of the possible for how quickly, how much we can get accomplished.
So all we're asking is for him to come back to us with a proposal, and you'll present that to us at the next meeting.
I think he will, but yeah,
Yeah,
we will.
well, we need a motion on that if somebody wants to make it.
I'll make that motion to approve the city to work with John Hewitt to get a proposal for the cost for that.
For Nimitz Lake, is what.
And just so I'm clear, that's not costing us a dime.
No, that is just to come back to you next month with the cost of.
Yeah, agreed. We're not spending any money at this point. We're just getting.
We're just spending John's time.
Yeah.
Making sure we have enough interest that we're not wasting John's time.
Yeah.
And it's going to come back with an agreement and public hearing, right?
It is, but it's to come back with an agreement and a public hearing. It will exceed $10,000, but we don't know how much it will exceed $10,000. I think we wanted to just put a cap on it as not to exceed. We didn't want it not to exceed 200, knowing full well that it sounds like y'all will have some discussions about how far you want to do that, how much money you'd like to spend on it, but not to exceed 200,000.
Yeah, and I like the idea of kind of the two-step. This is, just to do the one piece and then do the whole lake.
Yeah,
Okay,
Is
got
my
a
motion, is the motion clear? Do I need to restate it? Did you
Are
get
we
it?
calling a public,
No,
Wait till Mike.
we're not calling a public hearing?
no,
Wait till
No,
I
Mike.
thought that's what he, okay.
we
Make
will
sure it's all
have
the
to
parts
if
and
we
pieces
go
like
to
he does.
Yeah, to fund it, yeah.
fund
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah, but that's gonna,
we got another step to go first.
yeah, there wouldn't be a funding agreement coming at the same time, would it?
Well, there's a funding agreement for Mr. Hewitt to go out and do the work because it's in excess of $10,000.
But can't he make the presentation first and then?
We fill in the blank on the
Yeah.
amount.
Yeah, so this would be,
So he'll present it next meeting. We'll consider it. Will we need to wait and have another public hearing in January
January.
before we could, okay.
because really then at that point, you'll be able to say, you know, we want to do this entire thing, it's gonna be $200,000, or you want to do some truncated version of that, that's gonna be 100 and whatever.
One thing I'd add, and I don't want to complicate it, but I could look at going up Town Creek. I mean, there was talk about going up to the ball fields that way, or I could look at tying into Singing Wind too. I mean, that's another, I could just add it in there and y'all can choose A and D or B and C or whatever, or none of them if you wanted to. But I mean, I can look at it just the same if you're interested in looking at those costs.
We're gonna have to do it eventually. I mean, all those are areas that are
Yeah.
proposed, so.
I would, for the sake of the discussion, y'all talked about going west and what that would be.
I think that's
The board's purview, but
Well, going back to Gary's comment, what does the master plan say what the priority is next after we loop this?
West.
Is it west or is it connecting the?
it was the next one on that list was, so it
West.
was downtown and then it
West
was
on the south
west.
side.
That's right.
Yeah, the ball field was kind of the last one on the
last
whole
one.
list, as I
Yeah.
recall.
I mean, you have a built environment that gets you there. It's that, I think that one is just trying to figure out how do you do bike lanes.
So when you talk about an easement issue.
Yep.
Yeah, so 1 and 2, downtown and go west, 1 and 2
Yeah.
on the list of priorities.
Let me see, I'm trying to-
He's just trying to get you to spend 300,000 instead of
All right, so we got a motion pending.
I'll second it.
Second,
We're not spending anything.
all those in favor, raise your hand. Carries unanimously.
We're on the same page.
Okay. Thank y'all. Appreciate the clarity. I really appreciate the
All right,
discussion.
we've had everybody's attention for 2 hours and 6 minutes, so we're gonna take a 5-minute break, and then we'll reconvene in executive session. Okay, we're back in session, and I will entertain a motion to go into executive session under sections 551071, 072, 73, 74, 76, 87, to discuss workforce housing development projects.
So
So,
moved.
second,
We are adjourned in executive session.
good one.